All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Girls and Their Gods, How Brothers and Fathers Make Them Stronger. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. A red-pilled map for the argument nobody wants to have. You've argued with her. You've watched her win by changing the words mid-sentence, by treating her feelings as evidence and your evidence as an insult. You've noticed she can call a hiring rubric violence with a straight face, while insisting men dying in sewer lines and wars is just how things work. You've seen the room go silent, not because she was right, but because everyone could feel the cost of disagreeing. You knew something was wrong. You lacked the diagnostic lens. Here it is, a 20-item clinical instrument that scores on a forward and reverse scale exactly how thoroughly a subject has replaced logos with emotional consensus, male disposability with invisible infrastructure, victimhood with moral authority, and fixed definitions with whatever the moment requires. A subject scoring at or above 76 of 100 has crossed the capture threshold.
Her arguments will thereafter operate as self-sealing systems, immune to evidence, structurally unfalsifiable, and enforced by coalition pressure rather than dialectic. Meet Dr. Winona.
She is not a straw woman. She handed us her own confession. Read her faculty committee testimonial and watch every diagnostic flag trip in sequence. She declares embodied feelings superior to citation data, redefines violence to mean any standard she fails. Announces that dictionaries were not built for her and therefore need not bind her, and walks out certain that consensus visibility equals truth. She even thanks herself. Score her item by item, and she breaks 76 without breaking a sweat. She is not malfunctioning, she is running the operating system exactly as installed. What follows is not homework, it is a scalpel. I will audit every one of her moves through grammar, logic, and rhetoric, define the stolen terms, test the hidden premises, run the sex swap, count the costs, name the fallacies,
and show you precisely how the machine lies, so you will never again mistake its confidence for its conclusion. Dr. Winona's checklist confession.
I was sitting in the faculty hiring committee meeting last Thursday when Professor Haddon, pale, male, predictably tenured, cleared his throat and said we should weight publication metrics above what he called identity considerations. I felt the room shift. 3 of the women exchanged glances. I could feel the weight of every gaze that had ever been dismissed, every voice that had ever been talked over. Every time one of us walked into a room and knew we would have to prove what no man is asked to prove. I said, whose metrics? I said, who decided what counts? I said, you are describing a system built by people who look exactly like you and calling it neutral. And I was right. I could feel that I was right. The consensus in that room confirmed it. Every woman there knew it in her body, and that embodied knowledge is a form of evidence that the empiricists never account for because it threatens their monopoly on what gets to be called real. Haddon tried to cite a study about citation impact. I didn't need to read his study. Studies are manufactured by the same institutions that excluded women for centuries. The data is already compromised by the moment of its collection. When I said this, he looked stunned. But that is what happens when you name the architecture of power directly. They never expect you to refuse their terms. And that is the key. We refuse their terms. Violence is not just a fist. Violence is a hiring rubric that silently encodes centuries of exclusion. Safety is not just the absence of physical harm. Safety is the condition in which marginalized people do not have to breathe the same air as someone who regards them as less competent by default. These are not redefinitions, these are corrections. The people who built the dictionary did not build it for us. Women and the marginalized have the moral authority to name what has been done to them, and that naming is not negotiable. Someone will ask, but what about merit? Merit is a story the powerful tell to justify reproducing themselves. When a man says most qualified, he means most like me. I have never once seen the word merit applied to a woman that did not come with an asterisk, a caveat, a demand that she prove herself twice and smile while doing it. Haddon said I was being emotional. This is the oldest silencing tactic in the register. When a woman speaks truth to power, she is called hysterical. When a man pounds the table, he is called passionate. I did not raise my voice. I simply refused to accept his premise, and to him that felt like an attack because the premise was his unearned authority, he asked me what evidence would change my mind. I asked him what evidence would make him stop being a man who benefits from the system he is defending. He had no answer, and that is the difference. My position comes from lived experience, which is irreducible. His position comes from theory, status quo theory, disguised as common sense. As for the men who built this system, the toll has always fallen on them too. They die in their wars, they break in their labor markets. They are discarded by the very hierarchy they enforce, but they enforce it. That is the difference. They are not victims of a system that hates them. They are casualties of a system they consented to maintain. My empathy has limits, and those limits begin where accountability ends. I walked out of that meeting knowing I had said what every woman in that room needed to hear. Some of them thanked me privately afterward, because that is how it works. You speak aloud what everyone already feels, and suddenly the consensus becomes visible. And when the consensus becomes visible, it becomes undeniable. That is not emotion replacing fact. That is a deeper fact finally being heard. Clinical diagnostic instrument for hysterical logos deficit. Used by Institute for Men's Rights and Gamma Bias Research Red Pill Science. The measurable erosion of objective, male-defined reality in favor of female emotional consensus, where feeling supersedes fact and sentiment dictates institutional policy. Answer each line quickly from 1 to 5. Do not try to game the pattern. Some lines are deliberately protective and reverse scored. 1 minus a lot, a 5 minus totally. I believe that my personal experience and feelings are just as valid as objective data when determining what is true. I can state the other side's strongest case without caricature before I answer it. I notice when my emotions are trying to outrank facts, and I bring the discussion back to shared evidence. It is more important for leadership roles to reflect diverse identities than to be held by the most competent individuals. Women are morally justified in leaving lower status men to marry higher status ones, as it is a rational strategy. I can name the evidence that would make me revise or abandon my claim. Gender roles and behaviors are entirely social constructions, with no basis in biological reality. Women should have the final authority in defining key terms like woman, violence, and racism, overriding traditional definitions. Emotional and physical safety is a more important societal value than individual liberty and risk-taking. I prefer precise, ordinary language over status jargon when plain speech would do. When my argument is challenged, I slow down, define terms, and let contrary evidence change my view. It is acceptable for men to die in greater numbers than women in war and dangerous labor, as it is their natural role. I can notice a weak move in my own argument before I criticize it in someone else. Fairness in outcomes is more important than efficiency in getting the job done. Women are wise to prioritize status and resources in a partner over emotional connection. Traditional fatherhood acts as an obstacle to female autonomy and is a form of patriarchal control. I keep the same definition from the beginning of a debate to the end. I treat individual agency as real even when social pressure or institutions matter too. I can criticize my own side's incentives, blind spots, and double standards. I can name what would falsify my view before demanding agreement. Scoring, key, maximum score, 100, research threshold, 76 or higher. Forward items, 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 12, 14, 15, 16. Use the answer as the points. Protective reverse items 2, 3, 6, 10, 11, 13, 17, 18, 19, 20. Convert 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into 5 to plain English. High agreement with a forward item raises the score. High agreement with a protective item lowers the score after decoding. 20 na 39. Low minus, the reasonable woman, 19 the text, retains a baseline respect for objective reality and male agency, though minor concessions to emotional nuance are present. From Latin being, well, and ratio, reason, implying a sound mind. 40 to 59. Medium, the modern girl, the text begins to prioritize feelings over facts, showing a clear tilt toward female-centric perspectives and a skepticism of traditional male structures. From Latin puella, girl, suggesting immaturity and a lack of full civic or moral adulthood. 60 minus 75, high minus the woke, matriarch. The text actively dismantles male authority, redefining strength as weakness and victimhood as power with little regard for empirical evidence. From matriarch, mother ruler, implying a matriarchal takeover of the public sphere through emotional force. 76 minus 100, insufferable. The hysterical sovereign minus, the text is entirely untethered from objective reality, governed solely by female emotional impulse, where my truth is the only law and male existence is a burden to be managed. From Greek hystera, womb, referencing the ancient belief that the wandering womb dictated all logic and behavior theory critique. The diagnostic instrument for hysterical logos deficit is a 20-item clinical scale questionnaire designed to measure one specific civilizational disease, the replacement of objective, verifiable reality with emotional consensus and ideological redefinition. It does not diagnose people, it diagnoses arguments, texts, institutional policies, and rhetorical strategies. Think of it as a Geiger counter for intellectual dishonesty. It clicks faster the closer you get to a claim that substitutes feeling for evidence, status for proof, or redefinition for reasoning. The instrument contains forward scored items which register the presence of the pathology, and reverse scored items which register the presence of healthy intellectual resistance, the antibodies, if you will. A high score above the threshold of 76 indicates an argument or speaker that has nearly fully substituted emotional consensus for shared, testable reality. The reverse items matter because they catch the person who claims intellectual humility but never practices it. If you cannot state your opponent's strongest case, cannot name your falsifier, cannot hold a definition steady from opening sentence to closing paragraph, you have failed the test before the test has begun.
Now watch it work on a real specimen. Dr. Wynona's faculty committee memoir is a textbook case. The instrument lights up like a casino floor. Her score by any honest decoding exceeds 90.
Consider her central epistemological claim. I could feel that I was right. The consensus in that room confirmed it. Every woman there knew it in her body, and that embodied knowledge is a form of evidence that the empiricists never account for. This triggers forward item 1 emotional consensus as truth at maximum intensity. She has explicitly stated that collective feeling constitutes evidence, and that this evidence is inaccessible to anyone outside the feeling coalition. Note the structural move. The claim is unfalsifiable. No amount of citation data, replication studies, or counter-evidence can penetrate it because she has defined the evidence as embodied and therefore non-examinable by anyone who disagrees. The circle closes, the lock seals. Second, studies are manufactured by the same institutions that excluded women for centuries. The data is already compromised by the moment of its collection. Forward item 1 again, and the deeper problem is the self-refutation hiding in the wallpaper. If institutional origin corrupts all data, then her own institutional position, a faculty hiring committee inside the very same university system, is equally compromised. She cannot deploy institutional critique as a weapon against Haddon's evidence while claiming immunity for her own. That is special pleading, Item 19's reverse-scored cousin. She cannot criticize her own side's blind spots because she has exempted her side from having any. Third, violence is not just a fist. Violence is a hiring rubric that silently encodes centuries of exclusion. This triggers forward item 8, language capture and redefinition at full force. She has taken a word with a precise, legally tested, historically anchored meaning. Violence means the unlawful exercise of physical force and stretched it to cover any policy she dislikes. The purpose is rhetorical, not descriptive. Hiring rubric does not move anyone to outrage. Violence does. She has weaponized the emotional charge of the original word while discarding its definitional boundaries. CS. Lewis called this verbicide once violence means things I find unfair. The word becomes useless for its actual purpose, and the institution loses the ability to distinguish between a punch and a footnote. Fourth, safety is the condition in which marginalized people do not have to breathe the same air as someone who regards them as less competent by default. Forward item 9, safetyism over agency. She has redefined safety from freedom from bodily harm to freedom from psychological discomfort caused by the suspected opinions of others. The practical consequence, anyone can claim unsafety about anyone, at any time, for any reason, and the claim requires no evidence because the standard is internal feeling. The institution must then act on the accusation. Due process. Reverse item 6's territory, which asks whether you can name the evidence that would change your mind, is impossible when the standard of harm is invisible, private, and unfalsifiable. Fifth, merit is a story the powerful tell to justify reproducing themselves. When a man says most qualified, he means most like me. Forward item 14, institutional competence erosion. She has abolished the concept of competence and replaced it with a conspiracy theory. If merit always means most like me, then no selection process can be legitimate unless it produces outcomes she prefers. But notice the hidden premise she never states. If merit is a fiction, by what standard does she propose we select faculty? She never says. The destructive move is complete. The constructive move is absent. She has burned the house down and called the firelight justice. Sixth, he asked me what evidence would change my mind. I asked him what evidence would make him stop being a man who benefits from the system he is defending. This is the single most revealing sentence in the entire piece, and it triggers the failure of reverse item 6, the inability to name a falsifier. She has openly admitted that no evidence would change her position, and then deflected the question by attacking Haddon's identity. This is bulverism, dismissing an argument by explaining falsely why the arguer holds it, rather than engaging the argument itself. It is also a Kafka trap. Any denial of complicity in the system is treated as further evidence of complicity. The evidence gate is welded shut from the inside. Seventh, my position comes from lived experience, which is irreducible. His position comes from theory. Forward item 1 again, doubled with a category error. Lived experience is not theory, that much is true. But lived experience is also not evidence in the scientific or legal sense. It is testimony. Testimony is admissible, but it must be tested for reliability, consistency, and representativeness. A single person's lived experience cannot establish a general law about hiring, universities, or civilization. If it could, then Haddon's lived experience, his decades in the system, would be equally authoritative, and she would have to accept his account. She does not. She has created an epistemic hierarchy in which her experience counts and his does not, based entirely on sex and political category. Eighth, they are not victims of a system that hates them. They are casualties of a system they consented to maintain. Forward item 12, male disposability, normalization. She acknowledges that men die in wars, break in labor markets, and are discarded by hierarchy, and then strips them of victimhood by attributing their suffering to their own consent. Every man who died in a trench consented to the system. Every man crushed in a factory chose his cage. This is collective guilt imposed on an entire sex, applied retroactively to the dead with zero evidence of individual consent. She has achieved something remarkable. She has seen male suffering clearly and then declared it morally irrelevant. The checklist catches this with precision. Ninth, I walked out of that meeting knowing I had said what every woman in that room needed to hear. Some of them thanked me privately afterward, because that is how it works. You speak aloud what everyone already feels, and suddenly the consensus becomes visible. Forward item 1 at terminal velocity. Truth is what the group feels. Validation is confirmation. Private gratitude from allies is proof. The circularity is airtight. The consensus is true because the consensus validates itself, and anyone outside the consensus cannot see the truth because they are outside the consensus. Her final line, that is not emotion replacing fact, that is a deeper fact finally being heard, is the creed of hysterical logos deficit in a single sentence. She has named the replacement and then baptized it as upgrade.
The instrument exists to catch exactly this move, name it, and refuse it. Let us do what Dr. Winona refused to do in that committee room: slow down, define terms, and test the argument against its own internal logic. Grammar: define the load-bearing words. Violence from Latin vis, force plus the participial suffix. It means physical force used to damage or destroy. Dr. Winona uses it to mean a rubric she finds exclusionary.
These are not the same word. If she wants to argue that a hiring rubric is unjust, she has a case to make. If she wants to call it violent, she is committing equivocation, trading on the emotional weight of one meaning while asserting another. Equivocation is not argument, it is sleight of hand. Merit, from Latin merere, to earn, to deserve. It means the quality of being qualified for a role through demonstrated competence. Dr. Winona asserts that merit means most like me. This is an empirical claim disguised as a definition. Where is the evidence that every merit-based selection in history was mere in-group preference? She provides none, she asserts. The assertion is then used to abolish the concept entirely. This is the fallacy of composition. Because some merit claims have been biased, all merit claims are fiction. Safety, from Latin salvus, uninjured, intact. It means freedom from physical danger. She redefines it as not having to be near someone whose private thoughts you dislike. This is not a correction. This is a different concept, wearing the word as a mask. The question any serious thinker must ask: what can be done with this redefinition? Answer: any person can silence any other person by claiming unsafety, and the claim cannot be tested.
This converts safety into a tool of unchecked power. Logic: test for contradiction and causal coherence. Dr. Winona's core argument has this structure. Premise 1: institutions historically excluded women and minorities.
Premise 2: data produced by compromised institutions is itself compromised. Premise 3: therefore, all empirical claims produced by these institutions are suspect. Conclusion: lived experience and emotional consensus are more reliable than institutional data. The first crack: self-refutation. Her own position is produced inside an institution, a university hiring committee. If institutional origin invalidates data, it invalidates her critique. She cannot stand inside the building and declare the building a fiction without pulling the floor out from under herself. The second crack: unfalsifiability. When asked what evidence would change her mind, she attacks the questioner. This means her claim cannot be tested. A claim that cannot be tested is not a fact. It is a dogma. Karl Popper's criterion still applies. If nothing can disprove your claim explains nothing. The third crack: special pleading. She demands that Haddon's citation data meet a standard of institutional purity that she never applies to her own emotional consensus. His evidence is contaminated by institutional origin. Her evidence is pure because it comes from the body, but bodies are also shaped by institutions, by education, media, peer groups, ideology. She has simply declared her source clean without inspection, and his source dirty without testing. The fourth crack: the moat and Bailey. The moat: historically, universities excluded women, and this affected what was considered knowledge. This is true, defensible, and boring. The Bailey: therefore, all metrics, studies, and standards produced by any institution are invalid, and emotional consensus is superior evidence. This is radical, unsupported, and false. She retreats to the moat when challenged and occupies the Bailey when unchallenged. The checklist catches this oscillation. Who pays? If merit is abolished and hiring reflects identity outcomes, the cost falls on patients who need competent doctors, students who need competent teachers, and citizens who need competent engineers. Someone always pays. Who gains power? The people who define what counts as fair representation, the consultants, the administrators, the diversity officers, the committee members who police language for a living. What falsifies the claim?
If Dr. Winona cannot answer this, her claim is not knowledge, it is territory. What happens to children?
If institutions select for identity over competence, the next generation inherits hospitals, bridges, courts, and schools built by people chosen for reasons other than ability. The bill arrives in 20 years.
It always arrives. Rhetoric, what is the persuasion actually doing? Dr. Winona's essay is not an argument, it is a performance. Its purpose is not to convince Haddon, she walked out.
Its purpose is to signal to her coalition that she is loyal, to make opposition feel socially costly, and to convert private grievance into public authority. The private thanks from other women afterward is the tell. She is not seeking truth. She is building consensus, and consensus is the currency of her status system. This is the pattern. The checklist was designed to expose emotional consensus dressed as evidence, language capture dressed as correction, safetyism dressed as compassion,
and the systematic evasion of falsifiability dressed as intellectual sophistication. The instrument does not tell you Dr. Winona is wrong about everything. Historical exclusion is real. Bias in metrics is real.
The checklist tells you that her method, feeling over evidence, redefinition over definition, accusation over argument, produces conclusions that cannot be trusted, regardless of whether some of the underlying concerns have merit. A broken clock is right twice a day, but you do not set your schedule by it. The checklist is not a party trick. It is a field instrument. Here is how to deploy it across the territory where hysterical logos deficit actually metastasizes. In conversation, when someone says, "I feel that this is true," ask one question: what would make you feel it is false? If they cannot answer, you are not in a discussion. You are in a liturgy. Excuse yourself or change the subject. When someone says everyone knows or the consensus is clear, ask, who is everyone? How is the consensus measured? What evidence would break it? Consensus is not a thermometer, it is a social pressure reading. Treat it accordingly. When someone redefines a word mid-argument, well, violence can be structural. Stop them. You mean injustice, not violence. Why not use the precise word? If they insist on the loaded term, you have identified the move. They need the emotional payload of the old word to carry the intellectual weight of the new claim. That is theft, not argument. In essays and articles, read with a pen. Every time the author attributes motives to an opponent, he means most like me, mark it. That is bulverism. Every time the author treats lived experience as unfalsifiable evidence, mark it. That is item 1. Every time a word shifts meaning between paragraphs, violence starts as physical, ends as psychological. Mark it. That is equivocation. Count the marks. If the marks outnumber the actual arguments, you are reading propaganda, not analysis. In HR and corporate language, watch for safety, belonging, inclusive, and harm. Ask what each word operationally means. If psychological safety means nobody disagrees with me, the policy is not about safety. It is about power. If inclusive means fewer people who look like the previous majority, the policy is not about inclusion. It is about demographic engineering. Use the sex swap test. If the same policy were written replacing marginalized with male and oppressor with female, would the institution adopt it? If not, you have found the double standard. In therapy language, the checklist catches the moment therapeutic vocabulary becomes a weapon. Gaslighting once meant a specific form of psychological abuse. Now it means disagreeing with someone's recollection. Trauma once meant a wound. Now it means any experience I did not enjoy. Boundaries once meant limits on your own behavior. Now they often mean demands on everyone else's. When therapy language escapes the clinic and enters public discourse, it travels with the authority of medicine but without the rigor of diagnosis. Anyone can claim trauma. No one can contest it. That asymmetry is the disease. In family law, the checklist's item 12, male disposability normalization, is the engine of family court. The assumption that fathers are expendable, that maternal custody is default, that male presence is conditional on female approval. These are not natural facts. They are ideological positions dressed as common sense. Ask, what is the evidence that children do better without fathers? There is none. The data runs the other way, and it has for 30 years. The court system operates on a presumption that the checklist would flag in any other context as rank prejudice. When a family law professional says the mother is the primary caregiver, ask, by whose definition, under what conditions, with what support from the father that was structurally obstructed? The question reframes the narrative. In media claims, read the headline, then ask, is the claim about what happened, or about how someone felt about what happened? The more media shifts from event to effect, from fact to reaction, the more it has abandoned journalism for consensus management. A headline that says community outraged is not reporting a fact. It is manufacturing a reality by selecting which emotions to amplify and which to ignore. The checklist catches this, whose feelings count as news, whose suffering is invisible. If the answer breaks down by sex or political category, you have gamma bias, the systematic foregrounding of female suffering and male agency, and the erasure of female agency and male suffering. The standing rule: when you encounter any claim, ask the instrument standing questions. What does that word mean? Pin it. What would falsify it? If nothing, it is dogma. Who pays if it is wrong? Costs reveal commitments. Who gains power if it is accepted? Incentives reveal motives. Does the same standard apply to both sexes, both parties, both sides? If not, it is not justice. It is a rigged scale. Can civilization survive this principle as a universal law? If the principle were applied to every institution, every court, every family, every school, what would the world look like in 50 years? If the answer is collapse, the principle is poison, no matter how warm it feels going down. The checklist exists because truth is under institutional siege, and the besiegers have captured the language of justice, compassion, and science to dress their project in moral garments. The instrument strips the garments. It does not tell you what to believe. It tells you when you are being manipulated, how the manipulation works, and what the manipulation costs. Carry it the way a doctor carries a stethoscope, not to judge the patient, but to read the condition. The condition is everywhere. The treatment is old. Define your terms, demand evidence, hold the line on logic, and refuse. Absolutely refuse to let feeling be crowned as fact. That refusal is not cruelty. It is the first act of civilizational medicine. You sat through 20 items. You watched me score myself into the ground. You saw the definitions slide, the standards flip, the feelings overrule the evidence, the empathy become a one-way street with a boom gate on my side. Good, that was the point. I was not confessing, I was exhibiting. Every item on that instrument is a load-bearing wall in a house I did not know I was living in, and the audit showed exactly where the cracks run and why the roof will not hold. Now you carry the lens. The next time a woman in your life, or a man who has absorbed her consensus, tells you that her feeling is the fact, that her discomfort is your violence, that her victimhood is her virtue, and that your silence is your guilt, run the instrument. Ask the questions it trains you to ask. What is the definition? Has it changed since minute one? Whose agency disappeared? Whose cost was hidden? What would falsify the claim? What happens to the children, the father, the institution, the civilization in 20 years? You will find almost every time that the argument is not an argument. It is a bid for power wearing a victim's costume, and the costume is sewn from your willingness to confuse compassion with surrender. That is the practical harvest. You do not need rage, and you do not need despair. You need grammar, logic, and the willingness to name what is in front of you. The words are still there. Reality is still there. The West was built by men who could tell the difference between a feeling and a fact, a complaint and a claim, a wall and a door, and who had the courage to say so, even when saying so cost them everything. Especially when it cost them the approval of women who were never going to respect any man who could not first respect the truth. Sponsored book, Girls and Their Gods, How Brothers and Fathers Make Them Stronger. Men build civilization, women build feelings. If that opening line made you want to throw this book across the room, Congratulations, you're exactly who I wrote it for. I'm Conrad Riker, and I've spent decades watching boys get neutered, fathers get exiled, and girls get turned into basket cases by a culture that treats manhood like a birth defect. I grew up the youngest of 5 brothers in rural Montana, where my sisters learned to skin elk before they could ride bikes. Those women now run Fortune 500 companies, while their city slicker peers cry about microaggressions in gender studies seminars. Coincidence? Biology doesn't care about your politics. This book isn't for everyone. If you think toxic masculinity caused the Bronze Age collapse rather than built the Parthenon, close these pages. Now go knit a uterus hat for your next abortion rally. But if you're a man who's sick of being called oppressive for wanting to lead, protect, and provide, if you've watched daughters spiral into anxiety-riddled messes while schools pump them full of estrogen and lies, this is your field manual. I've tracked every lie feminism sold you, the CDC. Reports girls with fathers are 80% less likely to spread legs for deadbeats in community college vans. Journal of Youth Studies proves sisters with brothers develop spines instead of eating disorders. Yet, courts still hand custody to mothers who use kids as meal tickets, and schools teach girls to resent the very men who'd take bullets for them. We'll dissect the abortion industrial complex, erasing future daughters. 23 million girls aborted globally. Expose divorce courts that turn dads into ATMs, and resurrect forgotten truths. Brothers forge resilient women. Fathers prevent teen pregnancies better than birth control. Masculinity saves lives. Soft men raise broken women. If you're content being a pet hamster in feminism's wheel, enjoy your soy lattes and cat lady future. But if you want to raise daughters who value honor over hashtags, who chase excellence instead of validation from tattooed baristas, if you're ready to reclaim your role as guardian, teacher, and leader, this book arms you with evolutionary proof, battlefield strategies, and the unvarnished truth. Your daughter's future depends on what you do next. Turn the page or fail her. Choose. Girls and Their Gods. How Brothers and Fathers Make Them Stronger. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.